Hello everybody and welcome to the next edition of Ógra in Conversation With. I'm delighted to be crossing the virtual Cork-Kerry border today to speak with Norma Foley TD, who was recently elected for the Kerry constituency. Norma is a teacher by profession, and previous to her election to the Dáil in February, she was a Kerry County Councillor, I believe since 2004, and she's also served on Tralee Town Council, serving as Tralee Mayor for 3 occasions, I believe, and also serving as Mayor of County Kerry between 2018 and 2019. So Norma, I'm delighted to have you with us. I know it's a busy time and a difficult time, so we really appreciate you making the effort to talk to us today.
Not at all, George. Delighted to be asked, and I think this is a great initiative, particularly in the times that we're living in. You know, it's a great way to reach out and to communicate, and perhaps maybe even for people to get to know the newer TDs as well. So thanks very much.
No bother, perfect. I'll jump straight into it. So the first question I have is in relation to your first or your earliest political memories. So it doesn't have to be in your own career, but maybe as a child or a teenager when you first kind of noticed politics.
Well, I suppose for me, really, my earliest political memories would be Fianna Fáil. You know, they would joke here at home, you know, that they used to carry me in the carry cot, you know, to the Ardèche. It was a huge event in our family, but also in our community. There was just a huge number of people from the county that would travel to Dublin. It was a great social weekend, but it was also, I loved it in that there was, you know, great, you know, as I got older, I got more into it and began to experience what it was all about. And I loved the debates and I loved the cut and thrust. And there was always such a great, you know, atmosphere and energy and vibe about the place. And I just loved everything about it. I loved this notion of everyone, you know, within the party having an opportunity to throw their tuppence halfpenny worth, I suppose, into whatever debates were going on and maybe policy formation. And it was a very egalitarian format at that time. And it was also very unpredictable. There would have been, you know, great debates, and there would have been great discussion, and there could have been huge frustration and anger and disappointment, and then at the end of it all, everybody was friends again. But that was, you know, there was a great richness in that, and I loved it, and I think I was hooked from then, really.
Very good. And I suppose we could be returning to those great debates again, but hopefully we can all be friends at the end of it as well. I suppose then, so you talked about kind of the interest in politics and probably the coming from the family background. But then I suppose what attracted you then to actually putting yourself forward, or actually, you know, taking up a public life role? You know, obviously there could be family ties, or was it the community aspect, or as you say, the kind of coming together for the common good? So what for you attracted you to actually become a public rep?
Well, I suppose, as I said, I was very much exposed to it as a young person. You know, you know, there were 4 of us in the family, and I was always the one that would kind of trot after my dad, who was a TD. And so I went to all his constituency meetings and his community meetings and all of that. And I loved the idea of engaging with the community and being involved with the community and being in a position maybe to advance projects within the community or make things better, really, as it were, or at least contribute to trying to make things better. And, you know, from my own point of view then, I suppose, I became, in a personal capacity, hugely involved in the community myself, whether it was community groups or disability groups or youth groups, particularly, I suppose, with my background in education and all of that. And, you know, it just widened my scope and widened my interest and my breadth of interest in really that to get things done, you needed to be part of a political forum as well. So, you know, I just continued it from there, really.
Very good. And I suppose then, you kind of give us a good background of why and how you got involved. But I suppose, could you give us, I know that you're kind of starting a new chapter in the Dáil now, but you know, I think, is it 16 years now as a local councillor? So maybe you could give us kind of the ups and downs through your career so far, since being town councillor, a county councillor, and now a TD. If you could just briefly kind of give us an overview of your career so far.
Yeah, I suppose, and you've done a very good job in that now, George. You've given a great outline. And I suppose really, now that I reflect on it as you've gone through it, it just kind of, it was a step-by-step thing. You know, I began on the town council and loved it, absolutely loved the town council. And to be mayor of my own town on 3 occasions was just, you know, fantastic honour for me. But I loved, again, I'm going back to the word engagement, and I love the idea of at least attempting to be a problem solver. And I really think that's what a public representative is. You're a problem solver. You're doing your best to advance and promote your town, your county, your country. So, you know, serving on the town council, I then had the opportunity to serve on the Kerry County Council, and I continued to be on both the town council and the county council. And again, it was a very necessary step, because an awful lot of things, we'll say, from the town area crossed over into a county council domain, as it were. So I saw the necessity to progress from one into the other. And again, I loved the county council, and to be a first citizen of the county of Kerry in 2018-19 was probably, you know, at that time, certainly the highest achievement of my political career. And I loved every minute of it, travelling the county, putting the best foot forward at all times on behalf of the county as a whole. And you know, it was a challenge, and it was a different level of work, but I embraced it and I loved it. But again, when you get to that stage as well, I suppose you recognise that if you really want to impact on change, you have to move to the national stage, and that can be difficult, you know, to get to that step, and to you know, I'm very fortunate to have achieved that in February, and I'd like to think that I will continue the same work ethic, the same, I suppose, positive, proactive, problem-solving agenda that I would have had in the local authorities, and continuing that now to the national level, particularly for the county of Kerry, obviously, and for the country as a whole.
Very good. I suppose I know you're only a few months in the job, and as well, it's been turbulent times since that maybe the Dáil isn't sitting as frequently as it would have, and you know, the access to people and clinics and stuff. But can you identify any things so far that you find different compared to a county councillor to a TD?
Well, I suppose it's difficult to call that one out at the minute, given that it is very much a surreal setting in Dáil Éireann at the minute. You know, there's only a certain number of people allowed in the chamber. There isn't the same access to ministers as you would normally have. But, you know, I think we're a very resilient people. And so we find new ways of communicating, and, you know, new ways of getting our point across, and ensuring that, you know, your constituents are being well represented. So so we're doing that. You know, there's teleconferences, there's Zoom calls, there's the business of the Dáil is still continuing, in that you can put down parliamentary questions, contact ministers directly through their offices or whatever. So although you might not be visible within the Dáil chamber, and all the ministers are not visible within the Dáil chamber and all of that, the work actually is continuing, and it is phenomenally busy, because we are, as you have said, you know, in very testing and trying times, and there's a whole myriad of issues that people are faced with, you know, whether it's social welfare issues and payments, and families needed to be cared for, whether it's the health issues, as you're aware, whether it's education, and leaving cert, junior cert, access to third level college, how exams are progressing or not progressing, you know, people having family members in hospital, and access to testing, and the personal protective equipment for those on the front line, how businesses are going to, I suppose, regroup and reorganize themselves after COVID-19. And I think we're in the midst of the pandemic. We also must, you know, very much so have our eye to recovery and to planning for the future as well. So there's a whole variety of things that come on your table really now, as a newly elected TD, and perhaps even, you know, TDs of long standing. But, you know, I welcome that. That's part of it. And I suppose the one thing I will say about this pandemic, you know, as a newly elected TD, you learn very fast, because you have to learn, because you're representing your county, you're representing your people, and you want to be in the know, and you want to be in the best position to tackle the queries and to answer the queries that come to you. So it's, from that point of view, it's you know, it's very worthwhile. You know, you learn fast because you have to learn fast.
And I suppose you've kind of moved on to my next question, really, is that, or you've kind of outlined it, that it's a very varied job. You know, there's you know, all different types of sectors. It's either, you know, as you say, community engagement, or business support, or, you know, policy and legislation making and stuff like that. So I suppose from your time as a public representative, what do you enjoy most about the role?
I suppose I, you know, go back to this idea of, as I've said earlier, engaging with the people, working on the ground, knowing what the issues are, and having a willingness and a preparedness to work towards solutions. I think it's hugely important. I think people expect you, and all they really want of their public representative is somebody who will, you know, take up the cudgels on their behalf, who will fight the fight on their behalf, and will do their absolute best, you know, for whatever their query or whatever their issue happens to be. And that's the aspect that I like most, having the opportunity to engage with people and the satisfaction of giving it my absolute best to resolve whatever that issue or query might be.
Yeah, and I think you kind of answered my next question as well. You're very good at this. And it's I suppose you've outlined what you enjoy most, but then I suppose as it is a very varied role and there's different things, is there a kind of a particular thing that you can, you know, when you're finished in the evening and having a cup of tea and you get that kind of kick of the job satisfaction? So it might not be something you actually enjoy the most, but it's something you say, yes, I did something there that, you know, is worthwhile, and, you know, you get the job satisfaction out of it, because it's obviously a challenging role, and you kind of do have to find the successes, because sometimes it can be, you know, knocking you down all the time. So is there anything you can identify as a success that you can kind of say, I did a good job?
Oh yeah, well, I suppose there would be, you know, there would be individual cases where people, you know, individual circumstances where people were having difficulties, whether it's in, you know, it could be very simple things that people are having difficulty, maybe even knowing how to maybe apply to a local authority, apply for funding for some initiative. You know, it's opening up avenues for people. It's also maybe taking the bigger picture, okay, right, we'll say within your own county, where funding is needed for, you know, whatever funding is needed for, from a business point of view, from a health point of view, making sure really that your constituents and your constituency, your county, is on the national agenda. I think that certainly is going to be my direction, you know, going forward. And the satisfaction comes you know, comes really from knowing at the end of the day you're consistently working. I think if you know that you are giving it your best, and that if you're going through systematically every query that comes in for you, the big ones and the small ones, and can tick them off at the end of the day and say, yep, okay, I'm making progress on that. I need to make more progress on the next one, and even more progress again on the one after that. But there's a doggedness, I think, attached to being a public representative, that you never give up. You keep going, and that's probably something that gives me the most satisfaction. The downside is probably that there aren't enough hours in the day. I would certainly say that. You know, if there was more time, I suppose you'd always want more time. Okay, but yeah, that's about it, really, George. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you find that a lot with a lot of public reps is that, like, they kind of get the success, but then they say, right, move on to the next. So it's kind of a constant flow of just, let's get this done. And you're very similar to a lot of reps there. It's just, you know, you get one job done, you're moving on to the next to get it, you know. So I think that's kind of a common occurrence across a lot of public reps.
Yeah.
And I suppose then you've held, you're a TD now, you were Mayor of Kerry, Mayor of Tralee as well. And I'm just wondering, their career highlights, but is there any kind of a project in Kerry or they could be highlights yourself that you can say is the highlight of your career so far?
Well, I suppose if we were to look at the county as a whole, okay, right, we're looking at the greenways have been a very big, very, very big initiative here, and we are making very positive progress towards a greenway for the Tralee area, for Listowel, and there is a greenway being proposed for South Kerry as well. There's more work needed to be done on that, but it's, you know, we're very much a tourism county, so having the potential to open up the county even more, you know, within the different areas of the county, but also, you know, the county as a whole, I think that's a huge project for us going forward, particularly, you know, in the midst of this pandemic, and we realise that there are likely to be no international visitors actually visiting counties like Kerry and others throughout the country. So, you know, those initiatives are hugely important. And even if you were to go back to the town council time, like, you know, Tralee Town Council was very progressive in its attitude in terms of when there was never a portfolio, if you like, with local authorities to become involved in tourism and all of that. Tralee Town Council was very much before in developing initiatives, whether it was the Aquadome or Steam Train or different enterprises within the town. And now the local authorities have a specific portfolio in terms of economic development. And I think that's hugely beneficial. And I would be very proud to say that, local authorities in Kerry had that initiative long before it became national policy. So I would be very proud of that, really, and having had a role in that, and maybe even as a county, Kerry being a flag bearer for it, long before the initiative was realised and its potential was realised within national government.
Very good, very good. So we've been talking very positively so far, and I suppose the next section now is kind of the challenges, and I think you've outlined kind of one already about the not enough hours in the day. But I suppose, is there anything that you find the most challenging aspect of being a public mayor?
Yeah, I suppose, George, I would say about, you would love to have more time in the day to get through everything immediately. Like I suppose, yeah, downside for me is, if somebody comes with an issue, I like to be able to sit on top of that immediately and solve that immediately. And it doesn't always work that way. I suppose frustrating for me would be bureaucracy. There's layers and layers and layers. And I think that's a great fault that we have in our system. I think if there's an issue, there should only be one layer. But it would transpire really 9 out of 10 times there's 3 or 4 different layers. And I think everything, should be more accessible and should be more simplified for people, no matter what it is, no matter what the issue happens to be. I think there are unnecessary layers of bureaucracy for people. And if we could simplify that, and if we could make things more open and accessible to people, I think that would be much better. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic, as we've said, but I think people are very cognizant of that and very aware of it. And if you tell people what's happening, and if you say, this is, the situation we're in, and this is why we are doing what we're doing, people will come with you. But I don't think that openness and transparency necessarily always exists in government, and I think that's a pity. I think you tell it as it is, and if you level with people and if you're transparent, then people will understand where you're coming from. So I suppose if I could change anything, it would be that level of bureaucracy, as I said initially, but also that lack at times of transparency that I think is very necessary.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to your point earlier about the engagement with the community, that, if you let people know what's going on, it's far easier for them to come along with you,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I suppose then the next question I have for you, you obviously were quite young starting out back in 2004, and I suppose, what advice could you give yourself looking back over the years, or as someone watching here today that might have aspirations to run in the locals or generals down the line, what advice would you give a young person in politics today?
Stick with it, work hard at it. In politics, as in life, nothing, absolutely nothing will fall into your lap. If you want something, and if you believe in it, and if you feel that you can be, in terms of politics, that you can be a good representative for your locality or for your county or whatever, well, then work at it. Be out there in the community, and there will be defeats and there will be setbacks, and but just pick yourself up, dust yourself down, pick yourself up, and go. And I suppose a very good bit of advice that I got when I started out, one that I still find very difficult, but anyway, is, and don't take it personally. I think that's very good advice, because I think there is within all of us, the capacity to take everything personally. But I think in politics, you just got to say, roll with the punches. So my advice really would be, work at it, don't give up, and if there's a setback in the trajectory that you've set out for yourself, so be it. There's many more before you and many more after you, who will experience setbacks as well. So it will be the measure of you as to, how you pick yourself up at that particular time. Stick with it.
Thanks very much. I say hopefully people will take heed of that now, and will take that advice on board. And as you say, if you stick with it, you will eventually get where you want to go.
Yeah.
So then the next kind of section I'll go on to is, obviously, now that you're a TD and the pandemic, you don't have much free time. You can't get out and about as much as you'd like. But if you do have a spare minute, what are your interests or hobbies that you'd like to, outside of politics, what would you like to do?
Well, I love to walk. and again, within the 2 kilometres, I suppose, at the moment. But yeah, I do love to walk. 2 reasons really, 2 different types of walking. I like when I'm out and about, that I'm meeting people, I'm hearing what's going on, and again, it goes back to engaging. But then there's the other type of walking, you know, where I wouldn't be in an urban setting or whatever, and I would just take myself off. I like the quiet and the space. I get great opportunity to think things through and to evaluate and think, and just a bit of headspace really, you know. So I like that. I like being out in here in Kerry. We have, you know, no shortage of beautiful walks and beaches and all of that. So I particularly like that. I love to read. I would read anything. It doesn't really matter. I love to read. I would be hooked on newspapers and broadsheets, tabloids, no matter. I love fiction. I love poetry, anything with the power of the word. I love the written word. So, and I'm quite happy to sit in a corner for hours and hours and read if I had the time. But unfortunately, I don't have an awful lot of time in that respect. But I do, you know, if I'm traveling or anything like that, I think if you have a book, and I like actually to have the book in my hand, it just, you know, it can transport you to a whole new experience of life and new places. And you know, I love to enjoy the talent of those who are writers. So yeah, I like to read, and I like the arts as well. I have huge admiration for those who are artistic. Any kind of creativity, I love it, whether it's those who might paint or those who are creatively talented, you know, whether it's crochet or whether it's something with woodwork or anything at all. I love creativity, and so yeah, that's basically
very good. Very good. And I suppose that it's about balance, work-life balance. I suppose that political life is very hectic, and obviously the walking along Kerry and the reading kind of is a calming, soothing thing.
Yeah,
so it's a good.
absolutely.
The work-life balance is key really in politics. Thanks very much for that. I suppose then the other aspect I'll be looking at is the kind of social life. And down to the years, did you find that because you were involved in politics that you kind of, maybe friends that weren't involved in politics might have drifted away, or were you able to kind of keep the 2 separate, or did you find that maybe your friends became politicians as well and that was just your circle of friends, or how did that go in your life?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I would have an awful lot of we say personal friends who were not at all political, but who would canvass for me and who would work for me and who would help me out. Absolutely nothing at all to do with politics. And I think that's important too, because sometimes in politics you can be in a very limited circle where we're all very politically driven and we have a very, I suppose, definite political view of things. So it's very important, I think, to have those who are well outside of that, and because they bring a tremendously important balance, you know, to what you're doing. But I suppose social life is impacted by politics too. You know, you might want to go and see the latest play that's out or film or whatever it happens to be, and there's a common meeting and you've got to go to the common meeting. But look, that's the way it is. Or there's a community meeting, that's what you sign up for. And everybody, no matter what occupation they have, you know, there will be demands that kind of cut into personal life as well. And I think, look, that's the way it is. You buy into it, so you just do it. But I suppose in terms of social life, you would try, okay, a lot of times your social life does revolve around politics as well. You know, it might be going to events or meetings or whatever, and so be it. Look, I know no other way. I grew up in it, and I've been at it in a personal capacity myself, you know, for a long number of years, and that's fine too. You know?
Yeah, I think it's politics is very much kind of you're you know bred into it, or you're born into it, or it's in your blood. So it's not, it's kind of a life choice, and I suppose many careers that way, but politics is definitely one that you kind of have to incorporate your life around it. And if you're into it, it doesn't really matter that way. You know, that is your thing, like, you know.
Absolutely, George. I would agree with that. You know, it becomes part of your life too. And, you know, I would have to say within politics too, there's great capacity to make personal friends as well. I would have many friends who are, you know, within the party, but I also have many friends who are actually not of Fianna Fáil political persuasion. And I think that's important too, you know. You can cross all parties. Look, at the end of the day, anyone, irrespective of their political background, if they're in the political forum, they're there because they want to make a difference, or they want to contribute to community or county or whatever the case might be, or country. And so there's a lot of similarities too, you know, amongst those kind of people that are in there. So I would be open to friendship wherever it comes, and
Yeah,
I think that's a great thing too.
very good. Now, the next kind of question I have for you is, it's obviously canvassing and the campaign is a massive part of getting the job. It's probably not actually part of the job, but it is something that has to be done and has to be done
Yes.
very well. Obviously now you're involved in politics a number of years, so you've done a number of campaigns. And I'm wondering, do you have any kind of good or funny or interesting? I know there's plenty of characters down in Kerry, so I'm sure you have some stories that might be interesting of the listeners here today.
A funny story.
If you can, yeah.
Okay. Okay, right. Well, I would have many stories to tell you, particularly about dogs. Okay, right. But I'm not even going to go there. Okay, right. But I suppose it was funny. One of the most interesting things that happened to me there happened only a few years ago. I was canvassing, as you do, and as part of an election, and it was particularly bad weather, and I was canvassing in a rural area. So we had the car, and so there was a driver, there was myself, and there was another guy canvassing with me. But it was absolutely torrential altogether now. It was really, really bad weather. So I just said to the lads in the car, look, stay put, I'll run to the door, okay? And it was up quite a boreen anyway. So I said, I'll go to the door, which was kind of round the side of the house, stay put. So I ran around, okay, right, and took shelter underneath the door, knocked on the door and waited. And just as I was about to leave, because I thought there was nobody coming to the door opened. And the person at the door stood in front of me with not a stitch of clothes upon him. Honestly, I didn't know what to do, nor in fairness to he. So I just left quite quickly, okay, right. Probably did leave my literature. I couldn't even remember afterwards that I leave the literature. And because he immediately turned himself around the door and just a quick hello, goodbye, and I was gone. But I came back to the car and explained to the guys in the car what had happened, and they certainly thought it was the funniest thing ever, and they were disgusted that they had missed it themselves. But that's my story anyway. I suppose it probably, now looking back, it actually was very funny. It was unexpected, to say the least.
Yes, and hopefully you got the vote. It's absolutely embarrassing.
I will never know.
Yeah, you'll definitely knock twice next time or something before he comes to the door. Very good. I think that's the major part of our conversation over, but you'll be glad to hear that we have a quick fire round. So if you'll oblige us on that, it'll be great. So the first question I have is Barry's or Lion's tea?
Barry's. There's no politics when it comes to tea.
Very good. The next question is a politician, from another party that you admire.
I'm going to say Mo Mowlam. I always found her, and I, you know, this would be going back years now, so I would have been a lot younger at the time, but I remember recognizing her as a woman who was very feisty, straight talker, knew what she wanted, wasn't afraid to knock heads together, knew how to get things done. And there was something, and she was very engaging in conversation. Not that I ever met her personally, now this would just be from what I would read or what I would see on television about her, but there was just something quite remarkable about her. And it was only recently I realised that she actually died as a very, relatively young woman in her 50s, but she made a huge contribution to the whole peace process in Northern Ireland. And I suppose the other thing about her is that she was very much a woman in there, prepared to work hard, prepared to stand firm against an awful lot of opposition at a very difficult time, and not afraid to take a stand, really. So I would go with Mum.
Good answer. Then your favourite place outside of Kerry for a holiday, or for enjoyment, not for business.
Right.
You are speaking to a West Cork man here now, so
No, George, I'll tell you the truth. I'm going to tie it between two places, and I would have to say Cork first, okay, in that I absolutely love Cork. Went to college there, lived there and worked there for a number of years. Love Cork people. I think they have a very similar sense of wit, and appreciation of life really as Kerry people. And there's a huge number of Kerry people living in Cork, and there's a huge number of Cork people living in Kerry. So I love the the attitude to life in Cork. Was always very happy there, and would have been happy to probably stay there long term. But the call for a Kerry person home is always very strong. So I always knew I was coming home. But I'd also have to include now as another place would be County Fermanagh. My husband is from Northern Ireland, Fermanagh man, and really as a place to go and recharge the batteries, time out. Very, very beautiful county, the lakes, incredible people, very welcoming, and I think it was really primarily as well the fact that there's family there, and it's a large family, and love being part of that, and so I'd say it's a fair tie between Cork and Fermanagh.
Yeah, we'll take an honourable mention anyway. We won't fight over that. The next question that I have is, what's your best or worst joke? It could be the same thing now, but if you have a joke, you could tell us.
Okay, joke. Right, I'll have to say it's the worst anyway, the absolute worst joke. Okay, right. Why did the teddy bear not have dessert?
I don't know.
Because he was stuffed. Apologies, you said the worst. So.
Yeah. And
there you go.
You delivered. Very good. Now we're on to the final question, and it is quite difficult, but describe your life, if you can, in 3 movie titles.
3 movie titles?
If you can, yeah. So far.
3 movie titles. I would say The Notebook, because I like to write. Even as a child, I always loved to scribble or whatever. And so there'll always be notebooks around and about the place. But primarily as a politician, The Notebook is absolutely vital. You're out and about to meet somebody, there's a query, I would write it down. You're on the canvas, you write down the query at the door, whatever it happens to be. For others, like that's old style, but that's the way I do it. And I like to tick off then in my notebook what I'm doing and how advanced I am on whatever the query might be. The Notebook is just invaluable to me as a public rep, so I'm going to go with The Notebook. I'll go with Braveheart, because I think in life, as in politics, you have to be brave. Even when you don't feel it, you have to be brave. And go with your gut, go with your heart, and be brave of heart. And if you're convinced in your own heart that what you're doing and what you're standing for is right, well then no matter what the opposition is and whatever, you go with it. So be brave of heart. I'll go with Braveheart. And number three, It's a Wonderful Life. Because I do believe that we're in a very challenging time, as we said earlier today. Amidst all the difficulty and the sadness that's out there, and people who are currently in hospital and people who have passed away, we're also seeing the other side of things. We're seeing immense capacity within communities to roll up their sleeves and support one another and help one another. And we look forward to better and brighter days. And I do live in a very beautiful part of the world, and I know we'd be very biased. We each think our own home place is wonderful, but it's a fact here in Kerry. And so it's a very beautiful part of the world to live in, and I feel very fortunate to live here in Kerry, to live amongst a community that is so proactive and so positive, even in difficult times like we have now, and indeed to live in a country that is very much, resilient, and, a people who believe in supporting each other. So yeah, it's a wonderful life.
Very good. Thanks very much for that. In fairness, very concise answer for off the cuff. So thanks very much for that. That concludes our interview. So I'd just like to thank you very much for taking the time, Norma. It was fascinating, very interesting, and I believe that we got to know you a bit better, and I hope the viewers enjoyed it. And I'll just say thanks very much again for it. Thank you. And look after yourself.
Thanks, George. Delighted. Thanks, George.